right, so we ended with our control in this window that was accepting text. So and automatically scrolling it. So we're ready for a new command interpreter piece to be put in. I think one of the things I want to do before I get too far down is the ability to scroll this thing, which we don't have. That I don't think any good window would have that. So what I want to do is add another script for this. This will be part of my UI scripts, because it will be certainly a UI behavior, and I'll create that, and I want to call this one here drag UI to let me drag this around. And I'll have to consider whether there's more than one way to do this, I think. So let me check really carefully here to see how I'm going to do that. And I'll want to capture a pointer position when the mouse goes into the window, and then move the transform of the containing object. So this is something we'd be attaching to a control. Bring up Visual Studio and let it go in here. My Visual Studio. All right, let me go back over here really quickly and attach this to, do I attach this to the canvas or do I attach it to the console? I think I can attach it to the console. We'll find out what happens if this doesn't work out. Okay, and I think I do need to attach it to the console because the canvas doesn't move. It fills the entire screen, so my attempts to drag it are going to really be unsuccessful. The console, however, is a panel inside the canvas, and so this will work out a little bit better. I need to bring in, well, first of all, let me bring in some UI components here using Unity Engine.ui, and the event systems need to be brought in. Unity Engine.event systems for the event notifications. So that should work. Now, the reason for bringing in event systems is that I want to derive from other things. We do not have multiple inheritance, but we can implement multiple interfaces. So I want to, in particular, implement I pointer down. And so this will be an I pointer down handler. That's down handler. And well, I pointer up as well. I want that. What am I thinking here? I pointer up handler. So I want those two handlers to be done. Now they're going to complain that I have not. Oops. Let me come over here, and Alt Enter will tell me how to fix it, and I'll say go ahead and please add the interface. And same thing over here, Alt Enter. Why are you doing this? Okay. Alt Enter, implement interface. There we can go. And I prefer to have these at the bottom of it. So let me put it down here. But this is the idea here. Those are the handlers. Now they currently throw a not implemented exception exception, and that's fine. I'm going to remove that, but they currently are not implemented. So let's think about this. On pointer down and on pointer up. On pointer down, I want to keep track of whether the mouse is down or up. So I'm going to create a Boolean up here for that Okay, so a private bool, and that will be mouse down. That will start out at false. And the reason is that I want to track when the mouse is down and when it's up, so that I can make some adjustments to the control. So I'll start with pointer down and say that if that happens there, that I want to say mouse down equals true. And of course, pointer up is going to turn this back off here. mouse up equals true. It's not another way of telling whether I'm dragging things. If mouse down equals false. I'm inventing variables here. You have a way of telling whether I'm dragging things, and we can check this inside here, inside update. The other thing I'm going to want to have is a position. I want to know the mouse position at the start, as well as the control position here. So these will be specified as vector 3s. You'll find those in the transform. And so start mouse position and private vector 3 start position. That will be the control being moved. Okay, so maybe I should call that control position. Okay, and on mouse down, I want to set both of these, the start control position equals, and that's just going to be pulled out of transform dot position. Okay. The start mouse position is going to be obtained from the input, and I can get mouse position here. Okay, what is this problem? Does not contain a position. Let's see what its complaint is here. Transform does not contain this. You're a mono behavior. I'm going to be attaching you to something. Definition position. Have to think about this now. We are a I'm spelling position wrong. Boy, that threw me. I'm like, what's wrong on here? Of course we have a position. And I'm sure all of you saw that too. And we're probably virtually being at your monitors trying to point it out to me. But I found it without a whole lot of time. Okay, so I have a way of tracking the position when mouse down and a position when the mouse and the control position. The relative changes in these are really what I'm going to be interested in. I'm going to want to know the width of the control. Okay, so let me think about this a little bit here. The rectangle of how big we how big we are, and I'll also want to know how big the parent is. Now I could let's see, we may not have a rect transform position, so let me think here. Okay, I think I know how I did this before, and the easiest thing probably is to just have a rect transform and say transform my rectangle. I could probably what is your problem here? Okay, let's try it again here. This is a rect transform. You've seen fine there. I must have spelled it wrong. And then my rectangle. And I could probably just say something like my rect equals transform. The transform is a this is a transform, I think, as rect transform, because I believe the rect transform is a transform. Let me try to save this and run this and see if it works. The other alternative is to assign it inside the... Okay, that worked. The other alternative is to assign it inside the inspector, which would be fine for this, but I do like controls to sort of take care of their own hooking up. I want to have the width and the height right here, so a private float my width and private float my height, because I'm going to adjust these down here, and my width equals, and this will be the rectangular transform dot width. I want to give it a little extra space here and divide it by 4. I'm going to bound the scroll area within a narrow window around the screen, so you don't drag it off the screen. And that's what this is all about here. Rect.height plus 5 divided by 4. Okay, so roughly a quarter of the window size will be required as a border around the center of the screen to keep this from going up there. This can be adjusted and tuned as desired. Alright, so now that I have that information, I'd like to know what the parent transform is as well. The canvas should have a rect transform as well. Now, how am I going to get that? The easiest thing would probably be to hook it up inside the inspector again, but I want make it public just in case I have to set it up in the inspector. Transform, oops. Rect transform, and that is the parent rect. Okay, let me think about how we're going to get that. And I think I can parent rect equals I think I can say transform dot parent dot transform as rect transform. Okay, every object will have a transform. Not every object will have a rectangular transform, but both of these are going to be hooked up as you know, the parent will have a rectangular transform. Alright, so now that I have that information, that will be useful because I can now implement my scrolling relative to the position of the with respect to the position of the parent. So if the mouse is down, we will be dragging. Okay, so this is for dragging behavior. And since Unity doesn't have any nice little window dragging stuff because they don't have windows in their UI, we're making them here. I want to, first of all, have the current position, and that will be input dot mouse position. Thank you very much. Vector 3, I want the difference in the position, and that's going to be current position minus start mouse position. Okay, so that's how far we've moved the mouse from its initial position. And then a vector 3, and this will be the new window position will equal the start control position. I should probably call it control position over here. Position equals start control position plus diff. We're going to move it the same offset. So if I move the mouse up 10 units, the window should move up 10 units. That's the plan. And so I should be able to now just say transform dot position equals position new control position. And that should work there. Now there's going to be some some constraints and limits we're going to have to put on here, but let's see if I get anything of interest when I do this. The console has my drag stuff there, and I will do this, and let's see. There we go. There we go. See, that's window moving behavior. Now I have to click on the title or on any of the decorative border here. I cannot click inside here. I don't know if I have that in there or in here on any interior control. But just any other part of the decoration that's not covered. Okay. Do I have that scroll mass region? Okay, why is this hidden here? My alpha is there. There's the problem. Window interior didn't have that. I'm not sure why I didn't notice that before. Okay, so let's go back to this here. When we run this, I can move it around this way. Now, there's nothing to keep me from overrunning. Oh, I lost it. Overrunning the edges of it, and that's what I'm kind of concerned about. And that's why I was getting ready to do that constraining behavior. But already it looks pretty good. Okay, don't you think? Now, what I want to do here is to come down here and make a few little adjustments. If transform dot, and I want the local position on dot x is negative. And kind of just thinking right here. Let me think for a little bit. Okay, this is going to get maybe a little weird here. It's not so much that I wanted to get 0 minus, and I want the parent here, parent rect dot rect dot width divided by 2 and width, or transform and I don't know if I have this to here. Let me put another parenthesis in here so that I can make it clear what the different clauses of this is. Transform dot local position dot x is greater than, and that is parent rect dot width divided by 2 minus my width. So these are things that I'd worked out earlier. Look, I think that's okay. What is your this stupid Visual Studio? It does not match parentheses on me, and editors that I'm used to will match the parentheses. Okay, so and I could probably configure it to do that, but if we count them here, yeah, okay. So that's the thing here. I want to restrict the x there. Let me create another private bool restrict x, and while I'm at it, private bool restrict y. So what I will do is reset the transforms if they go beyond this value here. So restrict x equals true, and if not, else restrict x equals false. Okay, I'm probably going to come up with a cleaner way of doing this here in a bit. Now let's check the y, and that's going to be transform dot local position local Euler angles, local position dot y less than 0 minus parent rect dot height divided by 2 minus my height, or transform dot local position dot y is greater than, and parent rect dot height divided by 2 minus my height, and that will close the brace. Thank you. Restrict y equals true, else. It means it's hard enough to get right all in one piece though. So restrict y equals false. Alright, so now we have the two equations to indicate when we're restricting things. And now let's check on what we're going to do if we need to do some restrictions here. If restrict x, so I want a new x coordinate here, and the new x coordinate, I can just declare it here, I guess, int. Actually, it would be a float. This is the fake x, and the fake x will be if transform dot local position dot x is less than 0. If it's negative, then I'll say fake x equals 0 minus, and it's really this business right here. All right, well, let me check that carefully. That's my limit here. Do I have that right? I think so. Oops, come on. Boy, I hit one character wrong, and I have to do 20 more. They don't store hard carriage returns in their file. It's like they store spaces for everything, and then make me undo that. If it wasn't gone negative, then here, let's grab this again here and put it down here, and then I'll just get rid of the negative part of that and use the positive part of that. And then I just need to use that to create a vector. X position equals new vector 3, which is the fake x transform dot local position dot y 0.0f, and there's my new thing, and I can say transform dot local position equals x position. Okay, I could I could combine these together and not into one line, but I'm not going to try to do that. I'm going to copy this, and since they're so similar, restrict x and restrict y, we will have this down here. And I'm going to pause the video while I do this. Okay, you can see the changes that I made now to it. Fake x, fake y. This equations are now checking x, and they're using the equations that we checked y against. Otherwise, they're just assigning in the new position. I think that should be enough. Let's see if it works. And I have compiler errors here. Tell me what I got here. Unexpected symbol open brace on 54 and 63. Probably, let's see, 54 is here. Do I have too many open parentheses? Is that what you're complaining about? Alright, let me think. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2. one more here to close that out, and that will be, I already have that one up here. So I think that's it. And looks like I have one extra here. Okay. Let's see if this works there. As you can see right now, they mirror each other. I just had typed in an extra parenthesis. Okay, so now if I drag this over here, now see it's stopping. That's what I wanted to see. It's close, not perfect, but close, but at least it doesn't go all the way off the screen and I can grab it. So now I can move it around wherever I want to. Okay, so that's the first of my little tasks that I wanted to do. And sorry it took 25 minutes. The command interpreter is going to be another UI script, since console is here. It's hard to say if that's a command interpreter as a part of the console. I mean, as part of a UI piece. In fact, I think I will move it out here because, see, the console is the UI component over here, and it does the visual stuff. The command interpreter is a more abstract thing, and it will be with the other scripts because it's non-visual there. I could have a command interpreter that didn't have to have a graphical component. You could send it commands that would do things. So, command interpreter. So I have my own little shell, if you will. And the shell will be attached to the, well, where am I going to put this? That's a good question. And that's a real good question because I need something that's just going to hold non-visual scripts. And I oftentimes will just attach them to like the camera or something like that. But let's create an empty game object here, and this is going to be I call it manager. Let's call it managers, okay? Because they usually have a thing like the target manager was one that I had. I'll have a number of other things that belong there. This guy here, I can just take my command interpreter and I'll just attach it to it. Now I have a command interpreter in my scene. Okay, so that's what I mean by it's abstract. It just floats out there. Anybody can get to it. I will need to take that command interpreter script and bring it up inside Visual Studio, which I've done here, and we can move on from here. I'm going to have to talk about what a command is. That's going to have to be kind of an abstract idea of what that would be. And I guess I can go ahead and just define it right here. But, well, what is a command is going to be a string text that we'll do. And then there will have to be some action that gets performed with it. The proper way, I think, to handle the action will be with a delegate, because we're going to have a delegate to that we'll pass in for the command. Okay, so that means that when this action occurs, this delegate is invoked. I could even have a set of delegates that would be like a multicast delegate, so that several things could happen when one command occurs. But I think the best model is to let's define what the delegate looks like. Then it'll be a private delegate, and it's going to be a function that returns void. I don't need a return from it. I'm going to call this command action, and the command action is going to take that's a good question here. It's going to take a list of arguments here, and I don't know if I've defined what those are here. Let me just stop for a second. Okay, I want to send in a list of parameters, sort of like a broken up command line. For any of you who've had like operating systems or done any system programming, this will be like argv that array of parameters that programs would get. So this is what the command line is going to be, but it's going to all be broken up for us. So the action should see it already broken up. And C# has this ability here. Let me just bring it over here and I'll show it to you. And it's the params keyword here. Send a comma separated list of arguments of the type specified to the parameter declaration or an array of arguments of the specified type. You can send no arguments, and they give a list of parameters here to this, so you can see how they can pass it. It's a variable length list of arguments to a function. Now, what type of argument should they be? Am I going to use? I'm going to use object. So params object arguments. Object's pretty generic. Okay, and so there'll be a list of probably strings, but I'll I'll leave it open for that right now. And so let's define what a command is. And a command is going to be a struct, and it'll be command. I don't need to make a new object for this. I just need a struct to have a semicolon after it. This is an aggregate piece of aggregate data. It's a collection of stuff. And so there will be a public string text, which is the text of the command. Well, it'll be obvious from this context that it's a text of a command, and then a public command action. So it's a pair of these two. So for every string there will be a corresponding action, which will be this delegate here, or even a set of delegates, which will be functions that with a bunch of arguments, and they will be invoked when the string is found here. So I can just define my function along with all of its arguments, and however many there are, and that will be a perfectly good command action, as long as the arguments can be turned into strings. I'm not strings, into objects, but pretty much anything can be turned into an object in C#. So I think that's okay. Next thing I want to have here is, since I've defined this idea of a command, how about a list of them? Private command commands. It's not really a list, but I mean it's an array. I'm going to create the array all at once. So there's no need to have it variably expand or not. I'm not going to be dynamically adding new commands to it. Let me show you what I mean, though. I would have to have, of course, I have to have a function to call. Let me see. Am I going to need update? I don't think I do. I'm just checking over my notes here. I don't believe update. This is going to be purely event driven, and start's just there to initialize things. So let's come up with our first little mini command here. And when my first little mini command is going to be something for command /loc to give me the location in the world, to tell me where I am in the world. So I can just type that and it'll tell me where the player is found. That might be useful if I find some little problem in the world when I'm wandering around. So like I said, the controller is, I think, one of the best world building tools that we have if it's used properly. So we can find the location and then go there in the editor and make changes. So it's always nice to see where we are. The command their handler will be, again, a function that returns void. I'm going to call it onLoc. It's always going to be on whatever it is. And then it will take a params object args. Okay, so this is what it's going to be. Now, what are we going to do when this occurs? Say we're not returning anything. Well, command interpreter doesn't return any value there. It should send the text someplace. It should print out some text. And let me work on that here. String output. So every command is going to have an output string, and I'll want to make sure that we are running as the player right now. Let me think about how I'm going to do that. I'm sorry, I don't want to find out if I'm the player. I want to find out, I want to use the player as a game object. And in fact, I can just go ahead and declare that game object player. Okay, this is what I want. I want to be able to locate it here. And the way I'll do that is in start, I'll say player equals game object dot, and then I'll use the tag system. Find game object with tag, and that will be player. Okay, that's easy enough to do. It'll find it, and then I'll find it, but I want to check to see if it actually found it here. That was what I was looking at in my notes. I'd had if this player existed, then we'll do something here. And then what I'll do is I'll say output equals you are at plus player dot transform dot position dot x dot to string. And now you can format your strings in C# here. And so what I'm going to use is I'm going to format it F2. And we might want to, let's see if I can find something out here on Microsoft. I couldn't find it just now. There is custom string formatting in C#. And we can say I want this to be a floating point value with 2 decimal places, like this. And that should work. Now, I don't want to end it there, as it gives me 1 coordinate, but I'll say plus a comma to separate the... Alright, let me get my mouse out of the way here. Again, 1 mistake on the type and character, and I have to do 15 characters of backspace. And I'm going to grab this piece right here and copy it. And I don't want X, but I do want Y there. And that will be fine. And you know, I'm going to also want a plus and a comma and paste that in there. And this will be my Z. So this will give me my XYZ triplet. And that should be fine. That's my output string. You are at 5, 123.6, 70. You know, some XYZ triplet there. Now, what am I going to do with this? The other thing is, if I don't have a player, I have to give some response, but I can't use the player transform. And so, output equals, and I'll just say loc equals. This is what I've done in the past. Comma, question mark, and say no player ref found. So we're kind of providing some debug information with it to make it very clear that we don't have any clue where the player is. And for right now, if I were to run that, I get this because I don't have a player object or anything tagged player in the scene because this is just pure UI. That's okay. Now, what am I going to do with this? I can send it to the debug log, but I don't want to read the debug log. I have a console. How am I going to hook the console and this together? So that's going to be something that I'm going to look at here very shortly. But the important thing is I have a onloc routine, and now I can go back to how we're going to set up the command array. And that's going to be done further down here inside this. So I'll say commands equals new command array. There's no reason for you to indent this. Come over that way. I know it looks like a body of text, but let's not. I can just say new command, and then text equals. I'm naming my fields. And I'll say /loc, and then I'll say action equals, and that will be on loc. Okay, perfectly good. Now I've added it to the command. I can add more commands to this later, just by extending this. The array is not going to change at runtime. We're not going to be adding more little commandlets to this thing while the game is running. So there's no need to do that. How am I going to get a command into the interpreter? Oh, well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna register a listener with this, just like I might register listeners to other controls, and so we will use delegates for that. And so I'm thinking now how to say that. I should have an on submit thing that will work. And then it occurs to me as I look at my notes, the listener doesn't have to be here. The listener wants to be in the console. I'm going to have to add a listener to the console. Okay, so when the console gets a string, it's going to send it down here. And then we'll check to see if the string is a valid command. This means then that I'm going to want to have a let me write the public void on submit. Something sent to us. Now I'm going to put object source down here because most of the times I have listeners, I like to send the control down here, and I'm going to have some argument list, and I haven't talked about that yet either, of what that's going to look like. That's really going to be, when this is going to be a delegate, and the delegate's going to have to be defined by the console. So I guess I can't define that right now. Sorry for the confusion here. Let me save this off, and let me go grab the console and bring it up here so that we can do some more work with it. And I'll have to go find where that is in UI scripts, and the console script comes up in here. Now let's go back to the if I can find my notes on the console. If I haven't completely lost those. Nope, it's right over here. How am I going to do a delegate for this? And so go back up here and say, I'm going to want to have I'll put them up here at the top where I can find it real easy here. People are going to, if people want to register with me as a handler, the console, they're going to have to give me a delegate. So it's going to be a delegate, and it'll be a function that returns void, and this will be, I guess, a submit, a console submit handler. I'll call it that. And again, it will take an object source. So I will, when calling this, tell you where it comes from. Okay, so I think that's going to be the case there, that I will on submit put in my reference, which will be important if there's more than one console or more than one source of input going to whoever's generating the listeners. I mean, they may have more than one event, more than one command source. So we'll just do that. Now, what are the arguments going to look like? I'm not sure if I've worked that out here. I should create another object for this, and I'll come down here and I will put it after this script. I can get away with this. And this will be a class, and I'll say console event args, and this is going to be derived from event args. I thought there was an event args here. Is there? Did I not bring in event systems? Did not bring in event systems. So using Unity Engine event systems. So I'm following the same type of pattern that the event system handling for Unity does, and let's see if it's a little bit more. You still don't know what that is, do you? where are those event args defined here? Let me go and see if I can find it in the documentation. It's in system. That's where it is. This is not a Unity thing. This is a C# thing, and I just decided to use system for this. So I could have said system event args, but event args. There's my event args. Okay. So I'm going to emulate the Unity event system or the C# events, and I'm going to create that. My class is going to contain a private string, and that will be called text, although you'll never use it. You will be using the accessors for it. There will be a constructor, public console event args, and that will take some sort of a message. And and then text will equal the message. Scroll that up so you can see that. And then there will be a public string text property that will be read-only. This is why I did this, because I don't want to expose text. Okay, I don't want to expose text out there, so I just made a getter for it that returns a private variable. Okay, it's set via the constructor. So you set up the console event args, and they'll be passed back. So what that means then is that my console event args. That's what the delegate is going to do. It's going to I'm going to send it back something, and it will and it will break it up. So it's going to have to parse it. Now I could split it up here, I suppose, but I'll let it handle that inside the. I'll let whoever gets it handle the parsing, because they may have a different view of what their command is going to look like. If I had different command interpreters or different sources of stuff, let them handle parsing it there. And my public static event, and this would be the console submit handler, and this will be listeners. Okay, so just the listeners. That also means I'm going to need to have an add listener and a remove listener. So public, this must be static, so that listeners can be added before the console is even created. Add listener, and this will take a console submit handler, and that will be a type of an event handler. And so I'll just say listeners plus equals EH. You've seen that before. Why are you not allowed on static constructors? Public static. Oh, I didn't tell it what the return type was. Come on. There. That's the problem there. I'll do something similar with that for the removal. And that will be remove listener, and it should be remove listener, and then this will be listeners minus equals EH. Okay, those are the pretty standard thing to add a delegate to the list, remove a delegate from the list. And now all I need to do is to use this somehow inside my console. And where would be a good place for that? Probably in this input entered field might be a good place. And so I don't know if I have worked that out here. Let me just take a second and pause this. Okay, I do. Input entered is a good place, but I'm going to create an on submit routine for this that sort of mimics other on submits for things. So that would be called when you enter it, like our on end edit. Okay, so when something is given to me as the input control on the console, when something's sent up to the console, then I want to call on submit, and that would be input.text. That's the text that's sent in. So it doesn't matter where I want that. I'll also clear out the text. I think would be a good thing. I didn't do that last time, and that's input.text equals the. Okay. And the reason for that is because when you hit enter, the command line should disappear. All right. Now I don't have an on submit down here, and I'll come down here and add one for you, and that would and I'm thinking about whether I want to do this as. I had this in my notes as a protected virtual void, meaning we could subclass the console later on as and re-implement submit. So I'll do that here. All that means is that we have the possibility of creating special types of consoles by extending it and overriding the on submit. And if I have listeners, so you've seen that. Then, or I should say, if listeners is not equal to null, I get caught up in my C coding times. Then what we'll do is just invoke listeners, and we'll pass in this because that's the object, that's the source of the message that's being sent. And then I'll say new console event args, and pass in the message. And let whoever it is parse that there. Make sure I get that closing quote in there. Okay. And that's all I need to do for onSubmit. That's going to then notify whoever registered it with the delegate. I know it's kind of complex what's going on here, but we're going to somebody, meaning the command interpreter, is going to want to register a handler with us. They'll create a delegate, something that matches this delegate signature up here, and they'll pass it in to us. We will call it whenever a string comes in. A string comes in up here, we'll call onSubmit. It comes down here. If we have a list of listeners, we will notify them all, creating an argument list from the or really just a single string. I could break it up here, but I think I decided to break it up in the receiving side in case there were multiple syntaxes for the strings. I may come back and revisit that a little bit later. Okay, and what will happen over here then for inside the command interpreter, okay, is that we'll need to do that registration here. And how am I going to find the how am I going to find that command interpret, the console from here? And the answer is that I don't have to. Remember, I made these things static down here. Since they're static, they can be invoked and since this listeners list is static as well, I can add to it even if I haven't created a console yet. Any consoles that get created would have it. So I'm going to let all consoles will therefore share the same registration. So if I had two console windows open for some reason, you could type a command into either of them and they would work. Okay, their output would want to go to the console where you type the command. They'd all be functional. So that's the first thing. So that means then inside start, I'll want to register the listener, and I can do that up here, and I just have to say console.addListener. And then I can just pass in my whatever matches the delegate, but I don't have anything that matches the delegate here. Oh, okay. Let me just erase this so I don't listen to all the red stuff here. Let's create it down here, and that's going to be a public void. Doesn't really need to be because I'm going to be passing a delegate in here, but I'll also allow somebody to onSubmit. This is the onSubmit from the command interpreter. It's public. Anybody who gets their paws on it could submit a string into the command interpreter, and I like that idea. Object source, they have to tell me who they are, and then there will be console event args passed into me. So that's the event args. And since it's done that way, I can go back up here to start, and let's try doing this again. Console dot add listen. Oh, come on. I saw add listener there, and I just hit return. Console dot add listener, and I will say then on submit. Okay, and that registers it. It registers it with all consoles, whether the command interpreter is created first or not. Even if there aren't any consoles, they will register it with it. If a console comes into existence, it will have this registered list already, and on submit would be called. What is on submit going to do? Well, that's going to be a little bit complicated, and I'm running a little long here, so I think I'll stop right here. We have a couple of shells of interesting functions, interesting scripts. The console's been extended so that it will allow registering listeners to it. The console's been this input text clearing was added. That was something that was new. On submit is now being called anytime text is entered. The on submit will only do anything if their listeners have been registered with us as the console. So we check our list of listeners. If we find anything, we invoke it. Now this can be a multicast. There can be multiple listeners done. That's why it's plus equals here. Okay, I could have 5 or 6 different things. Why would I might want to do that? One thing I've considered doing, I don't think I've ever done, is adding a log, an auto logging thing that would log all the commands in their output. And if I did that, then I would have the log listener register itself with the console as well, so that it could be notified of the commands. However, it wouldn't get the output from the command either, so I'd have to think about how I would want to do that a little bit more. That's probably why I never did it. Anyhow, so they would notify the listeners of any strings that came in, and we'll pass it one of these structures here. What they get is an object that has some text in it, and they can get the text field out. They can't change the text field. They can't do anything other than get the text field out. So it's read only with one text field. The command interpreter was created, and what that has is a lot of complex stuff here, but this idea of a command action that will be performed when the command occurs. The command, which links a text command like /loc with an action like onloc. And so that's one of them. There's the array that was declared right here, but the array is initialized right down in here. So we can see one command that added to it and easily extended to however many commands we have. So as new ones get created, they just get added to the list. Whatever the user types as the command, minus the arguments, anything that the whole line is sent in as a argument list to us, and that's not it, but will be passed in as the console event args field. And onSubmit's going to break that up. It's going to split that into separate words so that we have the name of the command is in the 0 field, and then every single word after that. So I could have certain commands that have 4 or 5 parameters, and I could have some that don't have any. And onSubmit will create an array of arguments like this that will then submit to the actual command. What links these? Well, it's linked through the command list. onSubmit's going to walk the command list, finding a command whose text matches the first word in the console event args. When it finds it, it'll call it, and it will pass in the broken up array as an array of objects, a variable length array of objects, and then we'll be using it. Now notice onloc does not use any of its arguments because it has no arguments. You don't say /loc and type anything else. anything you do type will be ignored. So that was what was done in this video here. So I'm going to save this off for you and upload it, and then I'll see you next time when we can actually hook up enough behavior to make this work in game. And I'll also want to move the console. The console is only used inside this scene, so I'll probably want to create a clicking on this. I think I'll probably want to create a UI prefab from this, is what I'm guessing. I'll just go ahead and create it right now and drop it down there. And then I can just create more of them in my main game scene, and we can play around with those. Okay, so I'll see you next time.